Cole Winslow, founder, CEO, and a billionaire before he hit 40, cradled a steaming cup of espresso in one hand, the other casually tucked into the pocket of his immaculately tailored slacks. From his penthouse vantage point, the city sprawled beneath him, a glittering tapestry that seemed almost benign from this height. But harmless wasn't a word that applied to Cole's existence. His life was a razor's edge, a symphony of high stakes and relentless momentum. Behind him, the expansive living space was sterile, a testament to minimalist design that sacrificed warmth at the altar of pristine order. A housekeeper, efficient and discreet, appeared like clockwork each day. Meals were crafted by a private chef, a culinary mercenary who vanished the moment his dishes were plated. Every possession, from the meticulously curated art collection to the rare vintage whiskey and even the limited edition vinyl records, had been vetted, appraised, and positioned. Yet, despite the staggering accumulation of wealth and status, none of it felt truly his. His phone vibrated against the cool glass tabletop beside him, announcing the arrival of yet another congratulatory article. Winslow Tech expands into Dubai real estate. He didn't bother to open it. His name had become a brand, a shorthand for success that transcended the need for context. His signature on a deal was front-page news. His net worth had sailed past 9 figures the previous year, and yet, he couldn't recall the last time someone had spoken his name with genuine affection. The click of Sloane's heels against the polished floor shattered the manufactured stillness of the apartment. You've got Forbes at 2 o'clock, followed by the Honest investors. And don't forget we have the Prescott Foundation Gala tonight. You're giving the toast. Cole didn't turn. Is that tonight? You're the guest of honor, Cole. Her tone was light, almost playful, but a subtle calculation always lurked beneath the surface. Sloane Prescott, his gorgeous, impeccably poised fiancée, was the embodiment of everything the world told a man in his position should desire. But she rarely inquired about his sleep, his well-being, or even the simple things. I need you sharp for Dubai, she added, gliding closer to straighten his collar. The diamonds on her bracelet caught the morning light, scattering a fleeting constellation across the room. The jet's booked for Sunday, 1 week and we'll be done negotiating. Then Maui. She repeated the name, the promise of paradise laced with expectation. Maui. He echoed the word without inflection, his gaze fixed on the panoramic view. The silence stretched, punctuated only by Sloane's sigh. Cole, please don't get lost in your head again. This is your legacy. He offered her a practiced half-smile, the kind he'd perfected for countless photo ops. Right? My legacy. Later that day, after a relentless barrage of meetings and the obligatory round of handshakes, Cole found himself in the back of a chauffeured car as it merged onto I-40. The sky outside was beginning to bleed into a soft canvas of tangerine and rose. He stared out the window, unblinking, as the landscape blurred past. His grandmother's lawyer had been uncharacteristically persistent. 3 phone calls, 2 voice messages, and finally a formal letter had cut through the layers of gatekeepers and assistants that shielded him from the outside world. The terms of the will were deceptively simple. Return home to Asheville, reside there for 90 days, and inherit the entirety of her estate. Refuse, and the fortune would be donated to the community. It was classic Mae Winslow, stubborn, wise, and infuriatingly sentimental. Cole hadn't been back to Asheville in 6 years. Not since he deliberately severed all ties, leaving behind the idyllic town, the scent of baking bread that permeated the air, and the girl with flowers woven into her hair and hope shining in her eyes. Rachel. He hadn't allowed himself to think about her in months. Or perhaps he had, in those unguarded moments between wakefulness and sleep, in the recurring dreams he refused to acknowledge. The car hummed along the winding roads, carving a path through the dense Carolina forest. As they passed the weathered wooden sign that proclaimed, "Welcome to Asheville, where life blossoms," something deep inside Cole's chest shifted, a tectonic tremor that threatened to crack his carefully constructed composure. Memory had a way of surfacing uninvited. The cozy bookstore where he and Rachel had shared countless cups of coffee, debating literature and dreaming of the future. The secluded trail near the river where they'd shared their first kiss, the sun dappling through the leaves. The brick oven bakery where she'd knead dough before sunrise, her face dusted with flour, a portrait of quiet contentment. He hadn't simply left the town. He'd vanished, changed his phone number, moved across the country, chasing the relentless clamor of success to drown out the whispers of what he'd left behind. The car finally pulled up to the curb in front of Grandma's house, a sprawling southern-style home with faded blue shutters and a porch swing that still creaked rhythmically in the breeze. Nothing had changed. He stepped out, inhaling deeply. The air was thick with the sweet fragrance of honeysuckle and damp earth. The sky above Asheville seemed wider, quieter, than the perpetually hazy skies of the city. Ms. Opal, Mae Winslow's longtime companion and confidant, opened the front door before he could even knock. Her silver hair was pulled back into a neat bun, her apron still bearing traces of flour. Well, look what the wind dragged home. Hi, Opal. You look tired. She enveloped him in a warm embrace, as if no time had passed, no words left unsaid. I told your grandmother the city nonsense wouldn't fix that ache in you. Cole offered a small, non-committal smile. Inside, the house was precisely as he remembered it. The floral wallpaper, the antique piano in the parlor, the comforting aroma of cinnamon and old books. Opal pressed a small, sealed envelope into his hand. Your grandmother left this for you, said you should read it alone. He took it and retreated to the sunroom, Mae's sanctuary, where she'd spent countless hours knitting, listening to jazz, and dispensing wisdom. The envelope was thick, crafted from her favorite ivory linen paper. He opened it slowly, his fingers tracing the familiar script. My dearest Cole, if you're reading this, it means you came back. That alone tells me your heart is still good. And I hope it means you're ready to face what you left behind. Not just this town, but what truly matters. You have 90 days. I hope you'll use them to rebuild what money could never buy you. I don't need to say what you already know. P.S. Stop running. The world doesn't need another empire. It needs men who choose love. Always, Mae. Cole's hand trembled slightly as he carefully folded the letter. For a long while, he didn't move, simply sat in silence. The kind that wrapped around you like a comforting blanket and held up a mirror to your soul. Later, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the street lamps flickered to life, Cole ventured out for a walk. The town center appeared almost suspended in time. The same cobblestone streets, the same vibrant floral awnings shading the shops, the same mural of the Blue Ridge Mountains gracing the wall of the old bakery. And then he saw it. Whitaker's Hearth, a bakery cafe tucked into a corner just across from the bookstore. Light spilled from the windows, casting a warm glow onto the sidewalk. Inside, A woman was bent over the counter, helping a small boy reach something from the glass case. Cole stopped walking, his breath catching in his throat. The child's face, with its wide, innocent green eyes, unruly brown curls, and a curious tilt of the head, struck a chord deep within him. Something inside Cole cracked open, releasing a flood of long-repressed emotions. The woman stood, turned, and their eyes met. Rachel. The look in her eyes wasn't anger, wasn't joy. It was something more primal, more vulnerable, fear. And beside her, the boy tugged on her sleeve. Mom, that man looks like me. The world tilted on its axis. Cole's breath hitched, his throat burned. He didn't know how or why or when, but he knew one thing with absolute certainty. That boy was his son. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought mattered to me either way. The bell above the cafe door jingled softly, but the sound reverberated in Cole's ears like a thunderclap. For a disorienting moment, the world around him seemed to slow to a crawl. The murmur of conversations faded into a muted hum, the clatter of mugs became distant and ethereal, and the very air turned thick and heavy, as if he were submerged underwater. Rachel Whitaker remained frozen, her hand still resting protectively on the boy's shoulder, as if she were desperately trying to anchor both of them to the present. Her eyes, a darker, stormier shade of blue than he remembered, locked onto his. There was no smile, no welcoming gesture, only a fleeting flicker of something sharp and guarded, and a profound sense of pain that he hadn't been prepared to confront. Mom, the little boy repeated, tugging gently at her apron. That man, he really does look like me. Rachel blinked, her lips parting slightly as if she were about to speak, but no words came. She glanced down at the child, then back up at Cole, and just like that, the fragile moment shattered. Miles, she said quickly, her voice tight but soft. Why don't you go sit in the reading nook and pick out a book? I'll be right there. The boy looked disappointed but obeyed, wandering towards a cozy corner lined with oversized beanbag chairs and shelves overflowing with children's books. As he turned, Cole caught another, more prolonged glimpse of his face, and the recognition hit him with renewed force. That was his chin, his eyes, his mischievous, crooked smile. A carbon copy from an old-school photograph he hadn't thought about in decades. Rachel rounded the counter with brisk, purposeful efficiency, wiping her hands on her apron as she moved. She walked directly towards him and stopped just short of invading his personal space. What are you doing here? Her voice was low, controlled, but her eyes shimmered, not with tears, but with a contained fury that simmered beneath a veneer of calm. I mean it, Cole. Why now? She glanced around the cafe, lowering her voice even further. You don't get to just show up out of nowhere. I didn't know, he said quietly, referring to Miles. Her expression remained unchanged, a mask of carefully constructed indifference. You left, Cole. You disappeared. You didn't want this life. You made that perfectly clear. I didn't know, he repeated, his voice firmer now. I didn't know about the boy, about Miles. Rachel crossed her arms, her gaze unwavering. And if you had known, what would you have done? Given me hush money, signed a check, and gone back to your penthouse? She exhaled sharply, then closed her eyes for a fleeting second, as if summoning every ounce of her strength. This isn't a movie, Cole. You don't get to waltz back into town and play the hero. He took a step closer, closing the distance between them just enough to lower his voice to a near whisper. I'm not here to play anything. I came because of May's will. That's the only reason I returned. Until I saw him. Her gaze hardened, a steely glint in her eyes. Then finish your 3 months, sign your documents, and leave. He doesn't know who you are. Let's keep it that way. Cole felt the words land like a physical blow, a sharp pain to the ribs that stole his breath. I have a right to know him, he said, more to himself than to her. I missed 5 years. I can't miss any more. Rachel shook her head slowly, her expression a mixture of disbelief and weary resignation. A right? You gave up your rights the moment you ghosted every call, every message, every letter. I tried hard enough. Oh, don't you dare, she whispered, her voice trembling now. I flew to Charlotte. I stood outside your office building with a belly so big I couldn't even bend down to tie my own shoes. Your assistant wouldn't even let me in. Said you were at some gala with her. Rachel's jaw tightened, a muscle twitching in her cheek. You made your choice. Silence descended between them like an impenetrable wall, a stark reminder of all the years and opportunities lost. Cole's chest rose and fell, his heart pounding against his ribs. He desperately wanted to speak, to explain, to somehow rewind time and make different choices. But what could he possibly say that wouldn't sound hollow, inadequate, even insulting? Sorry seemed like a gross understatement, a mere platitude in the face of so much pain. Regret didn't even come close to capturing the depth of his remorse. I didn't know, Rachel, he said, his voice cracking slightly. If I had. But you didn't, she snapped, her voice sharper now, laced with a bitterness that cut him to the core. Because you didn't care to. Don't rewrite history just because it's convenient now. Cole looked over to the reading nook, where Miles was sitting cross-legged, completely absorbed in a picture book. The boy glanced up, his innocent gaze meeting Cole's. For a brief, fleeting second, a spark of curiosity, unburdened by judgment or preconceived notions, passed between them. The way he tilted his head, the same way Cole had as a boy when trying to solve a particularly challenging puzzle. I just want to talk, Cole said, his voice softening, pleading. Please, can we talk properly? Rachel's lips pressed into a thin, unwavering line. She hesitated, her internal conflict evident in the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. You still take your break at 4 o'clock? He asked gently, remembering how she used to sit on the back steps with a cup of tea and a honey scone, savoring a few moments of quiet amidst the chaos of the bakery. She blinked, surprised by his recollection. Some things don't change. I'll be here, he said, then turned and walked out of the cafe without waiting for her answer, desperate to escape the suffocating weight of his past. Outside, the air felt different, thinner, as if he'd run a marathon without moving. He leaned against the brick wall beside the cafe window, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair, disheveling it for the first time in years. His chest ached, not just from the weight of what he had lost, but from the raw, unfiltered pain he'd witnessed in Rachel's eyes, like a wound she desperately wanted to keep closed. He stared at his reflection in the glass, barely recognizing the man staring back. He still looked polished, composed, every inch the successful CEO, but inside, something had irrevocably cracked. He didn't know what he'd expected. A scene ripped from a romantic comedy, where the prodigal man returns, sees his son, and is instantly granted a second chance, neatly wrapped in a bow of forgiveness. Instead, he was confronted with reality. A woman who had learned to stand on her own, who had built a life for herself and her son in his absence. A child who didn't even know he existed. A past that wasn't simply buried, but entombed beneath layers of resentment and hurt. 402, the door creaked open behind him. Rachel stepped out holding 2 steaming cups of tea. She handed him one without a word, her expression unreadable, then sat down on the old iron bench next to the overflowing flower boxes. Cole joined her, careful not to say too much too soon, wary of shattering the fragile truce. They sat in silence for a minute, maybe 2, the only sound the gentle rustling of leaves in the breeze. The first time he asked about his dad, she said finally, her voice barely a whisper, her gaze fixed straight ahead. He was 3 years old. I told him he was away building cities, that he was busy helping people. I thought maybe that lie would sting less than the truth. He swallowed hard, the tea suddenly tasting like ash in his mouth. I would have been there if I'd known. But you didn't know, she countered, her voice laced with quiet devastation. Because you didn't want to. She turned to him, her eyes blazing with a fierce, protective love. And I'm not saying that to punish you, Cole. I'm saying it so you don't hurt him again by pretending this is something you're ready for. I want to be, he said, his voice raw with a desperate sincerity. I need to be. Rachel looked down at her tea, swirling the liquid in the cup. He's gentle, smart, asks too many questions. He cries at sad stories, and he's terrified of thunderstorms. You can't just drop in and pick up where you left off, Cole. He's not a project, he's a little boy. I'm not asking for much, he pleaded, his voice barely audible. Just a chance to get to know him. Her expression softened, just slightly, a crack in the carefully constructed armor she wore. You have 3 months here. I can't stop you from being around, but if you want anything more than a wave from across the street, you're gonna have to earn it. You're gonna have to show him and me that you're willing to put in the work. Cole nodded slowly, his throat tight with emotion. That's fair. She stood, brushing crumbs from her apron, her posture radiating weariness. I have to get back. Rachel? He said before she turned to leave, his voice laced with apprehension. Does he know my name? She paused, her back to him, the silence stretching taut. He knows the name Cole Winslow. He doesn't know what it means. Then she walked back inside the cafe, leaving the door swinging gently behind her, the scent of warm bread and cinnamon lingering in the air. Cole remained on the bench long after she disappeared, the tea growing cold in his hands. And for the first time in 6 years, the silence around him wasn't empty, a vast and echoing void. It was filled with possibility, and the long, arduous climb toward forgiveness. Cole barely slept that night. The darkness was filled with shadows that danced and whispered, and memories that stubbornly refused to stay buried. He sat in the sunroom where Grandmay had once knitted every winter evening, her favorite jazz record spinning softly on the turntable, now silent beneath layers of dust. The same rocking chair she used to occupy creaked softly beneath his weight, a familiar rhythm that echoed through the stillness of the house. In his hands, he held the letter she'd left him, creased and worn from countless rereadings. The simple words, written in her looping, elegant script, weighed more than any of his skyscrapers, more than all the accolades and achievements he had amassed. You already know what you need to fix. He did, and he also knew that it wouldn't happen with grand gestures or carefully rehearsed apologies. Rachel had made that crystal clear. Forgiveness wasn't a transaction. It was a process, a slow and painstaking journey that demanded unwavering commitment and a willingness to confront the ghosts of the past. By the time morning painted the sky in hues of lavender and rose, Asheville was already stirring to life, stretching and yawning like a sleepy giant awakening from a long slumber. He looked out the window as the lights flickered on in the bakery across the square, casting a warm, inviting glow onto the street. A handful of locals had already gathered outside, chatting, laughing, sipping their first coffees of the day, their voices carrying on the crisp morning air. That small corner of the world, once so familiar and comforting, now felt foreign and distant, and yet, it exerted a powerful pull on him, a magnetic force that tugged at his heart and whispered promises of redemption. At 7:45, Cole stepped out of Grandmay's house and made the short walk to Whitaker's hearth. The unmistakable scent of cinnamon and brown sugar hit him before he even reached the front door, a fragrant invitation to step back into the life he had abandoned. He paused, uncertain, his hand hovering over the door handle, before finally pushing it open and stepping inside. The cafe was alive with activity, a symphony of sounds and smells that overwhelmed his senses. A line of regulars snaked its way towards the counter, the hum of a state-of-the-art coffee machine providing a steady, rhythmic backdrop, and soft folk music drifted from hidden speakers, weaving a comforting tapestry of sound. And there she was, Rachel, behind the counter, her sleeves rolled up, a dusting of flour on her cheek, her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, but still catching the morning light. She moved with effortless grace, calling out orders, flashing genuine smiles at familiar customers, completely in control of her domain. He felt a strange ripple in his chest, a mix of admiration, regret, and a burgeoning sense of hope. Morning, stranger. Cole blinked, startled by the unexpected greeting. Tammy Lou, one of Rachel's longtime friends and employees, stood behind him with a tray piled high with pecan scones and a knowing smirk on her face. Her voice pulled him out of his reverie. You stalking our bakery now? Or did you just happen to wander in 2 mornings in a row? Guess I missed real coffee, Cole replied with a soft smile, allowing himself a small moment of levity. And scones that don't come in a branded box. Tammy rolled her eyes, but a warm grin spread across her face. Sit, I'll bring you something. Rachel's too busy to scowl at you just yet. He found a small, unoccupied table near the window, the same one he used to claim when he'd sit and watch Rachel knead dough, her brow furrowed in concentration, sometimes humming softly under her breath. The wave of nostalgia that washed over him was both warm and dangerous, a potent reminder of the simple joys he had sacrificed in his pursuit of success. A moment later, Rachel appeared at his table, wiping her hands on her apron, her expression unreadable. You planning to show up here every day? Maybe, he said, meeting her gaze directly, not wanting to cause any further friction. You being here is a problem, she stated bluntly, but there was no venom in her voice, only a deep-seated weariness. He lowered his voice, trying to keep their conversation private. I just want to see him, be part of his world. I'm not asking for everything, Rachel, just a chance. She sighed, glancing over her shoulder towards the back of the cafe, where Miles was likely engrossed in a book or helping with small tasks. He asks about you now. Not directly, but I can see it in his eyes. He's curious. Then let me ease into his life, Cole said naturally, his voice filled with a hopeful resolve. I'm not asking for a title or an explanation, just time. Time to show him who I am, and to earn his trust. Rachel stared at him for a long moment, her gaze intense, probing. Then, her features softened ever so slightly. A subtle shift that gave him a glimmer of hope. He's got a school fundraiser this weekend, a fall carnival with games, food, that kind of thing. He nodded, his heart leaping with anticipation. I know where that is. Don't approach him, she cautioned, her voice firm. Don't overwhelm him. Just be there. Let him see you from a distance. Let him come to you. I can do that, he promised, his voice barely above a whisper. She turned to leave, but paused, her voice quieter now, almost hesitant. He really does look like you know? Cole smiled faintly, a warmth spreading through his chest. He's better looking. She didn't smile back, but the way she walked away lacked the sharp, defensive tension it had the night before, and that, in itself, felt like a small victory. Later that day, Cole found himself sitting in Grand May's attic, surrounded by the ghosts of generations past. The air hung heavy with the scent of cedar and thyme, a comforting, timeless fragrance that evoked memories of childhood summers spent exploring the hidden corners of the old house. Old trunks lined the walls, their brass hinges tarnished with age, and soft light filtered in through a round window, casting a golden hue on the dust-covered floor. He opened one of the cedar chests, its hinges groaning softly in protest, as if guarding the secrets within. Inside were meticulously organized photo albums, bundles of old letters tied with faded ribbons, and a single carefully wrapped parcel with his name written on it in Grand May's familiar, elegant script. He opened it slowly, his fingers trembling slightly, as if he already knew what awaited him. A small, leather-bound notebook fell into his hands. It was Rachel's handwriting on the first page, a style he recognized instantly, the delicate loops and flourishes a reflection of her artistic soul. For the days I wanted to tell you everything. His hands froze, his breath catching in his throat. Page after page revealed intimate moments of her pregnancy, her innermost fears and hopes, small details about cravings and morning sickness, a list of names she liked, and her unwavering decision to stay in Asheville and raise their child, alone if necessary. A single line, scrawled across one page in a fit of raw emotion, made his chest tighten with a pain so profound it felt physical. I saw you at that gala. She kissed your cheek. You looked happy. I was invisible. Cole sat there for a long time, unmoving, the journal open across his lap, the weight of his past mistakes pressing down on him with suffocating force. Guilt wrapped around him like a heavy blanket, soaked in the icy waters of regret. Downstairs, a door opened and closed, and Opal's voice called up the stairs. You've got a visitor, Cole. He descended slowly, still clutching the journal, his mind reeling. When he reached the living room, he stopped in his tracks, his heart pounding in his chest. Sheriff Ed Whitaker, Rachel's father, stood by the fireplace, retired now, but still carrying the unmistakable presence of someone accustomed to being in charge, someone who commanded respect. Sir, Cole said, his voice barely a whisper, cautious and apprehensive. Don't Sir me, Winslow, Ed said, his eyes narrowed, his gaze unwavering. I came to say one thing, and I'm only going to say it once. Cole straightened, bracing himself for whatever was coming. I understand. That boy, Miles, he's my grandson. He's my whole world. I've been the man in his life from the start. Taught him to ride a bike. Held him through countless ear infections. Read him bedtime stories until my voice was hoarse. I've been there, every step of the way. I understand that, Ed, Cole replied quietly, his voice filled with genuine remorse. And I respect it. I'm not here to scare you off, Ed continued, his voice low and gravelly, but with an undercurrent of steel. Rachel's a strong woman. She'll decide who gets a place in their lives and who doesn't. But you, Ed stepped forward, his voice dropping to a near whisper. You don't get to play tourist with my grandson. If you're staying, then you better stay for Rayal. You better be prepared to put in the time, the effort, and the unwavering commitment that it takes to be a father, to be a part of his life. Cole didn't flinch, didn't back down. I'm not leaving. Ed studied him for a long, silent beat, his eyes searching, assessing, trying to discern the truth beneath the carefully constructed facade. Then, almost imperceptibly, he gave a small nod, a grudging acknowledgement. Then prove it. With that, he turned and left, the door clicking shut behind him, leaving Cole standing alone in the silent living room, the weight of Ed's words pressing down on him like a physical burden. As the door clicked shut behind the old sheriff, Cole looked back down at the journal in his hands, his fingers tracing the delicate script on the cover. Proof wouldn't come in words, or memories, or heartfelt promises. It would come in presence, in showing up, day after day, even when it was difficult, even when it was painful. And Saturday at that fall carnival he would start, even if it meant standing in the shadows watching from afar, especially if it meant earning the right to step into the light, to finally be a part of his son's world. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought mattered to me either way. The air thrummed with the joyful sounds of a community celebrating the season. Laughter echoed through the trees, children's voices rose above the soft folk music drifting from the speakers strung from the branches, and the crisp autumn breeze rustled through the colorful leaves. Orange and gold streamers fluttered from every surface, lending a festive air to the gathering. The annual Asheville Fall Carnival had transformed the elementary school's backfield into a whimsical wonderland. Hay bales were stacked high for decoration, creating cozy nooks and crannies, and colorful booths lined the perimeter, selling everything from homemade fudge and caramel apples to intricately handcrafted knit scarves and whimsical painted gourds. The tantalizing scent of kettle corn and warm apple cider hung heavy in the air, mingling with the earthy aroma of fallen leaves. Cole stood near the edge of the field, his hands tucked deep into the pockets of his impeccably tailored wool coat, trying to blend into the crowd. From where he stood, he could see all the classic carnival games. The ring toss, the dunking booth, the pumpkin painting station, the ever-popular pie-eating contest. But his eyes were fixed on one thing, one person, Miles. The boy was crouched at the beanbag toss, his small frame surrounded by a boisterous group of kids his age, all vying for the chance to win a plush prize. His face was painted like a fox, with bright orange fur and playful white markings around his eyes. His uninhibited laughter cut through the surrounding noise, piercing something deep inside Cole, something that words couldn't express. For a long moment, Cole simply watched, absorbing every detail of his son's appearance, his mannerisms, his unadulterated joy. He wasn't watching as an intruder, or as a millionaire trying to fix a past mistake. He was simply watching as a father, seeing his child move through the world with an innocent wonder that he himself had long since lost. Rachel was close by, helping to manage the raffle booth, her movements efficient and purposeful. But every few minutes, her eyes would flick to Miles, her gaze filled with a protective tenderness, and then carefully, almost imperceptibly, towards Cole. She hadn't smiled. Not once. Tammy Lou spotted him first, her sharp eyes missing nothing. Well, look who showed up, she said, sidling up to him with 2 steaming hot ciders in hand, a mischievous glint in her eyes. City boy trying to blend in at a hayride. You might need some flannel to pass. He allowed himself a soft, genuine smile, the first he'd felt in days. Working on it. She handed him a cup of cider, the warm liquid comforting against his chilled fingers. Rachel didn't think you'd actually come. She told me to stay back, keep an eye on things, make sure you didn't cause any trouble. So you're my chaperone? He asked, raising an eyebrow playfully. Tammy took a long sip of her cider and looked towards the boy, her expression softening. He's been talking about you, you know. Cole turned to her sharply, his heart skipping a beat. Really? What did he say? He asked if the man from the bakery window would be at the carnival. Said he looked like him but older. Rachel didn't answer him. Cole felt a deep, almost unbearable pull in his chest, a longing to reach out, to connect, to somehow bridge the gap that separated them. She's scared, Tammy added, her voice dropping to a more serious tone. Don't push her, Cole. Don't try to force anything. But she's also tired. You being here, consistently, reliably, will matter more than anything you could possibly say. Actions speak louder than words, especially with Rachel. He nodded, his gaze never leaving his son. He glanced back at the beanbag toss just in time to see Miles win a large, stuffed owl, his face lighting up with pure, unadulterated joy. The boy clutched the owl tightly and ran towards the pie booth, his foxtail bouncing with every excited step. Cole couldn't help but smile, his heart swelling with a warmth he hadn't felt in years. Suddenly, a booming voice rang out from the main speaker, drawing everyone's attention. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our annual cakewalk, one of our favorite traditions here in Asheville. Kids, line up in a circle. Parents, feel free to join in the fun. You all know the drill. Walk when the music plays and stop when it stops. Last one standing wins a homemade pie from Whitaker's hearth. At the sound of that announcement, Cole saw Rachel stiffen, her expression becoming suddenly strained. It was one of the town's most beloved traditions, and apparently it was still closely tied to her. Miles, oblivious to his mother's discomfort, was already hopping up and down with excitement. Mom, come walk with me. Please, Mom. Rachel hesitated for a moment, her eyes darting nervously towards Cole, before finally relenting. All right, she said, a sigh escaping her lips. But just one round. I have to get back to the raffle. The crowd gathered, forming a large circle in the center of the field. The band struck up an old-timey banjo tune, and the cakewalk began. Miles held Rachel's hand, skipping in rhythm with the music, his face beaming with happiness. Cole stood just beyond the ring of people, sipping his cider, pretending not to ache with a longing so intense it threatened to consume him. He wanted to be there, holding Miles' other hand, sharing in his joy, being a part of that moment. But he knew he had to be patient, to respect Rachel's boundaries, to earn his place in their lives. Then it happened. The music screeched to a halt, the sudden silence causing everyone to freeze in place. The host called out the winning number, his voice amplified through the speakers. Miles and Rachel erupted in cheers, jumping up and down with excitement. They'd won. The boy clutched his mother's hand, his face lit with pure, unadulterated joy. Rachel bent down, hugging him tightly, her eyes sparkling with a happiness that momentarily eclipsed the weariness and the worry. Cole watched from the sidelines, his heart overflowing. He was a silent observer, a ghost from their past, but in that moment, he felt a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, he could find a way to become a part of their future. He watched them, the mother and son, a tableau he was excluded from, and the realization nearly buckled his knees. It was a complete picture, a family portrait with a frame he couldn't seem to break through. As Rachel straightened, her gaze locked with his once more. This time she held it. There was a steadiness in her eyes, a quiet strength that drew him in. Slowly, deliberately, she moved toward him, Miles's small hand still clasped in hers. Hey, she said softly, her voice barely a whisper when she reached him. He wants to say something. Miles peered up at Cole, his face a canvas of smeared fox paint, the vibrant colors now running together at the edges. He cocked his head, studying Cole with an innocent curiosity. You look like me, he declared, his brow furrowed in thought. Did anyone ever tell you that? Cole crouched, lowering himself to the boy's level, meeting his wide, inquisitive eyes. Only the smartest people, he replied gently, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. What's your name? Miles Whitaker. He proudly held up his prize, the blue ribbon gleaming against the warm crust of the pie. I won a pie. It's apple cinnamon. Mom made it. I heard her pies are legendary, Cole said, remembering the buzz around the bakery, the hushed reverence for Rachel's baking. Miles nodded emphatically, then leaned in conspiratorially. You were at the bakery too, he whispered, as if sharing a secret. I was, Cole admitted, a wave of longing washing over him. He was there, but not really there, a ghost haunting the edges of their lives. Rachel's hand tightened subtly on Miles's shoulder, a protective gesture that didn't escape Cole's notice. Do you live here now? The boy asked, his innocent eyes searching Cole's face. Cole glanced at Rachel, seeking permission, then turned back to Miles. I do for a while. I'm staying at my grandma's house just across the square. Grand May's house. Miles's eyes widened in recognition. Mom says she was really kind. She was the best kind of person. Cole echoed, a pang of nostalgia hitting him. May was a beacon of light in this town, a woman who'd welcomed him with open arms when he was just a lost boy himself. The boy beamed, then paused, considering something. Want to see my school project later? I made a model of a treehouse with a secret ladder. I'd love that, Cole said, his voice catching slightly, a lump forming in his throat. The offer, so simple and genuine, was a lifeline he desperately wanted to grab. Rachel took a shallow breath, her eyes softening as she watched the interaction. Miles, why don't you go show Tammy Lou your prize? I'll be right there. The boy, pie clutched tightly in his hand, took off running toward the bakery, his laughter echoing in the square. Cole stood, his face still softened by the warmth of the moment he just shared with Miles. Rachel didn't speak immediately, allowing the silence to settle between them. He doesn't understand what this is, she said finally, her voice low and laced with concern. But I know that look. He's already attaching to you. I'm not going anywhere, Cole vowed, his eyes locked on hers. That's easy to say, harder to live. Rachel's gaze flickered with a mix of hope and apprehension. I came to the carnival, he said quietly, referring to his initial intention to remain distant. I stayed back. I waited. I let him come to me. Rachel's eyes searched his, trying to decipher the truth behind his words. You did, and you were kind. But Cole, she paused, choosing her words carefully. You're walking on fragile ground. He's never had a father figure besides my dad, and you're already making cracks in what he knows. That's not nothing. I don't want to hurt him, Cole insisted, his voice laced with sincerity. Then you need to be here not just when it's convenient or emotional, but for the hard days too. When he's sick, when he has nightmares, when he's quiet for no reason and won't say what's wrong. Cole nodded, his eyes never leaving hers, acknowledging the weight of her words, the immensity of the commitment she was asking him to make. Rachel finally let out a long breath, the tension visibly leaving her body. Come to the bakery tomorrow morning before open, she said, her expression unreadable. His brows lifted in surprise. Yeah, not for coffee, she clarified, a hint of a smile playing on her lips. For work. We've got flour deliveries at 7 o'clock. Let's see what you're made of. He smiled, accepting the challenge. I'm warning you, I've been known to burn toast. We don't toast flour, she retorted, a playful glint in her eyes. She turned and walked away before he could respond, leaving him standing in the square, the weight on his chest feeling marginally lighter. But for the first time since he'd come back to Asheville, Cole felt the smallest crack of light pushing through the weight on his chest. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't love. But it was something, a beginning, a chance to prove himself, to earn his place in their lives. The morning air was still thick with the pre-dawn chill when Cole arrived at the back entrance of Whitaker's Hearth. A faint fog clung to the sidewalks, softening the edges of Asheville's early morning hush, lending the town a dreamlike quality. The lights in the bakery glowed like a beacon in the dim, sleepy street, promising warmth and the comforting aroma of freshly baked goods. He hesitated before knocking, his hands tucked deep in the pockets of a navy fleece jacket that looked much too clean and new for the work ahead. The door cracked open, revealing Rachel silhouetted against the warm light of the bakery. You're 5 minutes early, she said, her voice still thick with sleep. She wore a faded sweatshirt and jeans, her hair pulled back in a loose bun, a delicate dusting of flour already adorning her forearm. I didn't want to be late, he explained, eager to prove his commitment. She gave him a quick once-over, her expression assessing. Good, because you're carrying the flour crates in from the truck. I figured, he replied with a small smile, stepping through the door and into the welcoming embrace of the bakery. The kitchen was a hive of activity, warm and alive with the intoxicating smell of yeast and cinnamon, a symphony of scents that promised a delicious day ahead. A large metal table stood in the center, already scattered with mixing bowls, trays, and laminated order sheets, evidence of the early morning preparations already underway. Tammy Lou was there, too, tying on her apron and humming along faintly to an old Patsy Cline tune on the radio, her presence adding to the cheerful atmosphere. Well, look what the rooster dragged in, she grinned, her eyes twinkling with amusement. Mr. Suit and Tie turned doughboy. Cole smirked, accepting the teasing good-naturedly. Do I get a name tag? Nope, you get the crates. Truck's outside. She gestured toward the back door with a flour-dusted hand. He turned to Rachel, seeking confirmation. I'm serious about being useful. We'll see, she said, her tone noncommittal but her eyes hinting at a grudging approval. Outside, the delivery truck was parked along the curb, its back doors already flung open. Cole climbed in and began hauling out the flour bags, 50-pound sacks stacked deep. By the third one, his shoulders started to burn, the unaccustomed strain taking its toll. By the sixth, his breath was coming in ragged gasps. But he didn't stop. He pushed through the pain, determined to prove his worth. Inside, Rachel watched from the prep station, her arms folded across her chest, pretending not to care, trying to maintain a detached demeanor. But every time he winced, her brow twitched imperceptibly, betraying her concern. By the time he dragged in the final crate, his hair was damp with sweat, his chest heaving with effort, and his muscles screaming in protest. All right, Rachel said, tossing him a rag. Wash up, then I'll show you how to make pie dough. Cole blinked, surprised. You're letting me touch the dough? He knew how precious her recipes were, how carefully guarded her techniques were. She tilted her head, her expression unreadable. Don't flatter yourself. It's only because we're short on hands this morning. He stepped up beside her, rubbing his hands with the towel, appreciating the implied compliment, the subtle acknowledgement of his presence. You always this tough on new hires? No, she said flatly, her gaze unwavering. Just the ones who left without saying goodbye. The moment hung in the air, thick with unspoken words, with the weight of the past. He didn't reply, knowing that any explanation would fall short. Instead, he focused on the dough, watching her every move with rapt attention, memorizing the precise measurements, the delicate touch. She demonstrated once, her hands moving with practiced grace. Flour, butter, ice water, then pushed a bowl toward him. Your turn. He followed her steps carefully, his eyes flicking from her hands to his own, trying to replicate her technique, to capture the magic she wove into every pie. Rachel leaned against the counter, watching with the faintest trace of amusement, a ghost of a smile playing on her lips. You're being gentle, she noted. Most people overwork it. May used to say, dough's like a relationship. Handle it too rough and it falls apart. Too soft and it never sets right. The memory brought a wave of nostalgia, a longing for the wisdom and warmth of Rachel's grandmother. Rachel's eyes flicked to him, a flicker of surprise, a hint of vulnerability. Something shifted in her expression, softening her features for just a moment. She used to say that, she murmured, turning away to grab a tray, her voice barely audible. The morning rolled on with a rhythm he hadn't expected. He rolled out crusts carefully and deliberately. She fixed his edges, smoothing out his imperfections. Tammy Lou cracked jokes about turning him into a barista next, her laughter filling the air with lightness and warmth. The hum of the ovens and the scent of rising bread gave the place a pulse alive and comforting, a stark contrast to the sterile, corporate world he'd left behind. When Miles walked in around 8, his backpack slung over his shoulder, Cole looked up instinctively, his heart skipping a beat at the sight of the boy. Mom, he said brightly, his face lighting up as he spotted Rachel. I showed Mrs. Doley the pie I won. She said it looked too good to eat. Rachel leaned down, brushing a stray crumb off his shirt, her expression softening with maternal pride. Did you tell her you helped make the whipped cream? Miles beamed, his eyes shining with accomplishment. Then his gaze landed on Cole, his brow furrowing in slight surprise. You're still here. Cole smiled, his heart swelling with a warmth he hadn't felt in years. Told you I'd be around. Did you make anything yet? Just dough, Cole said, a hint of self-deprecation in his voice. And I might have oversalted one of the batches. So no promises. Miles giggled, finding the idea of a salty pie hilarious. Can I help? Rachel hesitated, glancing at the clock. Only for 10 minutes, kiddo. Then you've got to get to school. They stood side by side, Rachel, Cole, and Miles, at the long prep table, a makeshift family unit forged in the heart of the bakery. Cole handed Miles a tiny apron that Tammy Lou had dug out of a drawer, a relic from Rachel's own childhood. It barely reached his knees, making him look even smaller and more adorable. Cole whispered, You look like a professional already. Miles grinned, glancing up at him with a mixture of admiration and affection. We should make chocolate muffins next. Rachel shook her head, a playful exasperation in her voice. It's apple day, remember? The boy groaned dramatically, rolling his eyes. Apples again. Cole leaned in conspiratorially. You know, I used to think the same thing when I was your age. But if you sneak a tiny bit of caramel inside the apples. Miles gasped, his eyes widening with excitement. That's genius. Rachel raised a brow, feigning disapproval. Sabotaging the menu already? He grinned, unabashed. Innovation. Miles helped fold dough scraps, his little hands dusted in flour, his brow furrowed in concentration as he mimicked Cole's movements. Cole didn't realize he was holding his breath, watching the boy so closely, absorbing every detail, cherishing every moment, every laugh, every glance. It all felt like seconds he'd never get back, but didn't want to miss again. When it was time to leave for school, Rachel walked Miles to the door, Cole following behind, his heart aching with a bittersweet mixture of joy and regret. He stopped as she helped zip his coat, a simple act of maternal care that resonated deeply within him. Miles looked up at her. Can he walk with us? Rachel looked at Cole, her expression questioning. Do you want to? He nodded quietly, his throat tight with emotion. They walked the few blocks to school in silence at first, the morning sun rising over the rooftops, painting the town in a warm, golden light. Then, Miles began to chatter about his art project, how he wanted to draw a comic book, how Mrs. Doley had a beagle named Frank. His chatter was light, joyful, filling the silence with a sense of normalcy, a glimpse into their everyday lives. At the school gates, Rachel crouched to hug him, her voice filled with tenderness. Have a good day, okay? He nodded, then turned to Cole, his expression shy but sincere. Bye. The word was shy but real, a small offering of acceptance that sent a jolt of electricity through Cole's heart. Rachel stood up beside him, watching as the boy ran through the doors and disappeared inside, swallowed by the bustling school. They stood quietly for a moment, the silence no longer uncomfortable, but filled with a shared sense of tenderness and hope. He's amazing, Cole said, his voice filled with genuine admiration. Rachel didn't answer right away, her gaze fixed on the school doors. Then she turned slowly, her expression somber, her voice quiet. You missed a lot, Cole. I know. The words were a heavy admission, a weight he carried with him constantly. He walked at 9 months, said his first word right after his first birthday. Moon. I don't know why. He used to cry when he heard thunder. I used to sleep on the floor next to his bed. She paused, her voice thick with emotion. He called my dad Pops until last year. That's when he realized no one else in his class called their grandpa Dad. Cole's throat tightened, overwhelmed by the enormity of what he had missed, the precious moments he could never reclaim. I tried, she whispered, her voice breaking, to protect him from the hole you left. But holes don't just vanish. His voice was raw when he answered. I want to be here for him, for everything. She didn't look at him, her expression guarded. Then start proving it. With that, she walked away, the back of her sweatshirt catching the light, her figure fading into the bustle of the morning. Cole stood still, watching her disappear, and for the first time since his return, he realized what earning forgiveness would really mean. It wouldn't be dramatic. It would be quiet, steady, earned with flower-streaked hands and early mornings, one moment at a time. The sun was barely peeking over the Blue Ridge Mountains when Cole unlocked the back door of Whitaker's hearth. He stepped inside quietly, careful not to startle anyone. Though the soft hum of early morning jazz playing through the speakers suggested Rachel had already been at work. Again, the kitchen smelled like brown sugar and roasted pecans, a comforting aroma that wrapped around him like a warm embrace. He paused in the doorway, taking in the now familiar chaos flour scattered across countertops, bowls stacked in the sink, and Rachel in a faded flannel shirt and apron, gently brushing egg wash over rows of miniature pies. You're early, she said without looking up, her voice betraying a hint of surprise. I brought coffee from the good place on Market Street. He held up the paper cup, offering it as a peace offering. She glanced over, her expression softening slightly. Trying to bribe your way into extra brownie points? No, just figured you've been up since before dawn again. She gave a small, reluctant smile and nodded toward the prep table. Fine, 1 cup, but only if it's strong. Cole set the coffee down and leaned against the counter, watching her work with a quiet admiration. You always work this hard? Only on the days that end in Y, she quipped, then softened, taking a sip of the coffee. She closed her eyes briefly and sighed, the tension visibly leaving her body. Okay, you're forgiven for being 5 minutes late yesterday. He smiled, acknowledging the small victory. Progress. They moved into rhythm again, rolling, cutting, filling trays, the same way they had for the past several mornings. But this time, the quiet between them didn't feel like distance. It felt familiar, comfortable, almost companionable. Cole stole a glance at her. There were dark circles under her eyes, but she was still beautiful, in the kind of way that didn't try to be the kind of beauty that just was natural, strong, worn in, not worn out. Rachel, he said softly, breaking the comfortable silence. Can I ask you something? She hesitated, her hand hovering above a tray, then steeled herself. You just did, she quipped, then softened. Go ahead. Back then, when I left, did you ever plan to tell me? She froze, her hand hovering above a tray. The air stilled, the gentle jazz suddenly feeling too loud. He didn't rush her, allowing her the space to grapple with the question, to find the words to answer. Finally, She set the tray down and leaned back against the counter, arms folded across her chest, her expression guarded. I did, she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. I tried. I didn't want to raise a child with a lie between us, even if we weren't together. He nodded slowly, understanding the weight of that decision, the burden she had carried alone for so long. But you didn't. No, because I saw you remember. Her voice trembled at the edges, revealing the vulnerability she usually kept hidden. In Charlotte, at that rooftop event, you were standing next to Sloane. She was wearing that gold dress and you were laughing. You looked happy, untouchable. I had one hand on my stomach and a hotel key in the other, and I couldn't do it. Cole's breath caught, the memory flooding back with painful clarity. The event, that flashbulb moment, the carefully constructed image of success. He remembered the rooftop, the drinks, the photographers. He'd been performing a role that night, pretending the future was shiny and complete, but it hadn't been. I wasn't happy, he said softly, his voice filled with regret. I was performing for investors, for press, for the idea of what I thought success had to look like. You didn't look unhappy. Neither did you, he replied gently, his eyes searching hers, seeking forgiveness. Rachel looked down, blinking fast, fighting back tears. I went back to Asheville that night and didn't tell a soul, not even my dad. Just said it didn't work out. I started writing letters to you during the pregnancy. Never sent them. Couldn't find the right address or the courage. Cole stepped closer, bridging the gap between them. I found them in May's attic. Her head snapped up, eyes wide with shock. They were in a box, he said, his voice low and tender. Wrapped in that blue ribbon you always used for gift wrap. She closed her eyes, allowing the wave of emotion to wash over her. She said she saved everything. She did. Rachel let out a shaky breath, and for the first time he saw it, how tired she really was. Not just from work, but from carrying it all for so long, from bearing the weight of their shared history. I didn't just leave you, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. I left who I was with you, the better part of me. She looked up at him, her voice barely above a whisper, filled with a mixture of pain and longing. You broke my heart. I know. The timer on the oven beeped sharp and sudden, breaking the spell, but neither of them moved. The silence between them held more weight than anything else in the room, the unspoken words hanging heavy in the air. Finally, Rachel turned and pulled the pies from the oven, setting them gently on the cooling rack. The golden crust sizzled, filling the kitchen with a buttery aroma, a comforting counterpoint to the emotional turmoil swirling around them. She didn't face him when she said, this doesn't change things. Not right away. I don't expect it to, but you need to know. She turned around slowly, her expression serious. Miles is sensitive. He's smart, but he feels everything. He asks questions when he senses something is off. He's gonna ask about you. What should I say? Rachel turned around slowly, her eyes searching his, seeking honesty. Tell him the truth, that you made a mistake, that you're trying to fix it, that you're here now. I can do that. She nodded, a flicker of hope in her eyes. Then she grabbed 2 plates from the shelf. Sit. We need to taste these before they go out. Quality control. Cole pulled out a stool at the island, his heart lighter than it had been in years. She placed a still warm hand pie in front of him and one for herself. He took a bite, his eyes widening in surprise. This is dangerously good. Rachel smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. Of course it is. They sat in silence again, the soft jazz playing low in the background, the comfortable rhythm of the bakery washing over them. Then the front bell jingled, breaking the spell once more. Tammy Lou stuck her head in, her eyes twinkling with a mischievous glint. Sorry to interrupt your little pie date, but someone just pulled up outside in a Lexus convertible. Tall heels, big attitude. That looks like trouble. Rachel raised an eyebrow, her expression suddenly wary. Anyone you know? Cole's heart dropped, a cold dread settling in his stomach. Slowly, he stood and walked to the front window. There she was, Sloane Prescott, stepping out of her car like she was on a magazine shoot, her every move calculated, every detail perfect. Perfect hair, designer coat, lips painted in a shade of red that matched ambition. She adjusted her sunglasses and looked directly toward the bakery, her gaze unwavering. She's here, Cole muttered, his voice barely audible. Rachel joined him at the window, her expression calm but watchful. I take it that's her? He nodded, his throat tight with anxiety. Yeah, she doesn't know about Miles. Rachel's expression didn't shift, her composure unwavering. Well, she's about to. Cole stepped back from the window, running a hand through his hair, suddenly feeling exposed and vulnerable. Rachel stayed still, her gaze fixed on Sloane. She's not just a complication, she said after a pause, her voice measured and deliberate. She's your past, and I need to know if you're going to choose to stay in the present. He looked at her, the weight of it all suddenly pressing down on him, the enormity of the choice he had to make. I don't want a life with someone who only wants part of me, he said quietly, his voice filled with conviction. I want this flower mistakes early mornings. You him. Rachel met his gaze, her eyes searching his, seeking the truth. I've heard words before, Cole, she said, her voice steady and unwavering. Let's see what you do next. The bell over the door jingled again, announcing Sloane's arrival, and just like that, the storm arrived, threatening to shatter the fragile peace they had begun to build. The jingle of the bakery door fell like a dropped glass in the silence, the sound echoing through the room, amplifying the tension. Sloane Prescott stepped inside Whitaker's hearth, her presence immediately commanding attention, like she owned the room, its occupants, and everything in it. Her heels clicked once on the polished wood floor before she paused to take it all in, her gaze sweeping over the rustic beams, the chalkboard menu, the mason jars lined neatly along the shelves, her expression a mixture of disdain and disbelief. It was a different world from the one she belonged to, and she didn't hide her surprise, her eyes widening slightly as she took in the quaint, unassuming space. Cole, she said, removing her sunglasses slowly, her gaze landing directly on him, her voice dripping with a mixture of accusation and possessiveness. There you are. Cole stood frozen for half a beat, caught off guard by her sudden appearance, his heart hammering in a strange, confused rhythm. He didn't want this confrontation here, not in the space, not in Rachel's space. Sloane, he said calmly, trying to maintain a semblance of composure. I wasn't expecting you. That's clear, she said, scanning the room, her gaze lingering on Rachel with a barely concealed disdain. I've called, I've texted, I even emailed you. 3 days of silence. I thought maybe your jet broke down, or her eyes flicked to Rachel, You've found a new distraction. Rachel didn't flinch, her expression remaining calm and unreadable. She stood behind the counter, wiping her hands on a dish towel, her posture alert, her senses heightened, watching, listening, assessing the situation. I needed time, Cole said, trying to explain, trying to defuse the situation, to think. And this is where you chose to think? Back in Mayberry? It's Asheville, Rachel said coolly, her voice injecting a note of steel into the conversation. Sloane turned to her, offering a tight, insincere smile. Of course, sorry. I'm Sloane Prescott. Rachel Whitaker. Oh, the baker. Rachel gave her a small nod, acknowledging the introduction. You make the pies he's been texting about. Probably, Rachel said, then added with just enough bite to make her point. But he's been baking them himself lately. Sloane looked back at Cole, her eyes narrowing, her composure beginning to crack. Seriously? Cole tried to keep his voice level, trying to maintain control of the situation. I've had a lot to process, right? Sloane said, her voice laced with sarcasm, her eyes narrowing. You vanish mid-deal, leave your board hanging, and I find you elbows deep in pastry dough, playing house with a woman you haven't seen in 6 years. The air snapped, the tension in the room becoming almost palpable. Tammy Lou appeared in the kitchen doorway, took one look at Sloane and backed out without a word, sensing the impending storm. Cole stepped forward, trying to steer the conversation away from the public eye. Let's talk outside. No, Sloane said, her voice rising, her anger bubbling to the surface. I came all the way here. We're talking now. Rachel met Cole's eyes, her expression suggesting a quiet acceptance of the inevitable. Maybe she has the right to ask. Cole's jaw tensed, his internal conflict raging. He looked at Sloane, his eyes filled with a mixture of regret and determination. You want the truth? That would be refreshing. I left Charlotte because I needed space from everything. From the noise, the deals, the image. I came here for the will. I stayed because I saw someone I'd once loved and someone I never knew existed. Sloane blinked, momentarily stunned by the unexpected revelation. What does that mean? Rachel's voice broke the silence, her tone measured and deliberate. It means you're not the only one who didn't know about the boy. Sloane turned to her sharply, her eyes blazing with anger and disbelief. What boy? The room quieted, the silence amplifying the tension. The unspoken words hanging heavy in the air. Cole swallowed, his throat tight with emotion. Sloane, I have a son. The words landed like thunder, shattering the carefully constructed facade of their past. Sloane blinked, laughed once, short and stunned, as if she couldn't quite grasp the reality of what she was hearing. He's 5, Cole continued, his voice low but firm. His name is Miles. Rachel didn't tell me back then. She tried. I didn't see it. I didn't want to. Sloane stared at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of shock and betrayal. So, this trip wasn't about you taking a breath. It was about running back to her, to them? I didn't plan for this, Cole said, his voice low and sincere. But now that I'm here, I can't walk away from it. Sloane took a step back, as if the words had physically hit her, the impact of his revelation rippling through her, shattering her carefully constructed world. So that's it. You're just saying? Cole didn't hesitate, his voice filled with a newfound conviction. Yes. Rachel looked down, her hands tightening on the dish towel, her expression unreadable. She hadn't expected him to say it, not like that, not out loud, not in front of Sloane. Sloane's voice dropped, her anger giving way to a raw, wounded vulnerability. We had a life planned. We had a launch in Dubai. You were giving a speech next week. You promised me I promised you a future that looked good on paper. Cole cutting. But it wasn't honest, he said, his voice soft but steady. Not to you, not to me. A silence fell again, a deeper one, filled with the weight of broken promises, shattered dreams, and the unraveling of a carefully constructed facade. Sloane's eyes burned, not with rage, but with a profound sense of disbelief, as if she couldn't comprehend how her carefully crafted life had suddenly crumbled around her. You said you loved me. I wanted to, he said, his voice soft but steady. But I don't think I ever did. Not the way you deserve. I don't want to hurt you more than I already have. Sloane turned to Rachel, her voice filled with a bitter resentment. Is this what you wanted? Rachel blinked, her expression unreadable. I didn't ask him to stay. I told him to prove it. Sloane gave a bitter smile, her eyes filled with a wounded pride. Well, I hope you get more from him than I did. She turned on her heel, her heels clicking sharply as she walked out the door without looking back, leaving a trail of shattered expectations and unspoken resentments in her wake. The bell jingled again, marking her exit, and then silence descended once more. A heavy, oppressive silence that filled the void she had left behind. Cole exhaled slowly, releasing the breath he felt like he'd been holding for days. He felt like he'd been holding his breath for days, bracing himself for the inevitable storm. Rachel didn't say anything. She walked over to the window and looked out at the street, her expression thoughtful. He followed her, stood beside her, close but not touching, respecting the invisible boundary between them. I'm sorry, he said, his voice filled with a genuine remorse. She shook her head, her gaze fixed on something outside. Don't say that like it's a line. It's not. I meant it. Every word. I'm not leaving. Rachel turned to him, her eyes searching his, seeking reassurance. That wasn't for me. That was for you. You needed to say it. You needed to be honest for once. He nodded, acknowledging the truth in her words. I still don't know what this is between us, she admitted, her voice softening, revealing a hint of vulnerability. And I'm not going to rush into something just because it feels familiar. I'm not asking you to, he said gently, his voice filled with understanding. I just want to be here with you, with him, one day at a time. Rachel's gaze softened just slightly, a hint of a smile playing on her lips. One day at a time. She walked back toward the kitchen, her posture straightening, her resolve hardening. We've got an order for 12 mini pecan pies. You up for it? Cole let out a breath, releasing the last vestiges of his anxiety. Put me in, coach. Rachel gave the faintest smile over her shoulder, a subtle acknowledgement of his presence, his willingness to step up. And don't burn the crusts. He stepped into the kitchen after her, feeling a little lighter than before, a little more hopeful. The storm had come and he was still standing. He had weathered the worst of it, and now he had the opportunity to rebuild, to earn his place, to prove his worth. The bakery was quiet again, but this was not the usual comforting quiet that came after the morning rush. This silence felt heavy, like the echo of something unresolved, the kind that lingered after too much had been said, and not enough. Cole stood at the sink, rinsing a mixing bowl that didn't need cleaning, his movements deliberate, his actions a distraction from the turmoil swirling within him. His sleeves were rolled up, his arms damp, his thoughts louder than the jazz playing softly overhead, the music a mere backdrop to the drama that had just unfolded. Rachel had gone to the front to restock the pastry display, giving them both a moment to gather their thoughts, to process the aftermath of Sloane's visit. Though they'd exchanged a few words since Sloane's dramatic exit, neither of them had touched the real tension still sitting between them, the unspoken questions, the lingering doubts. He dried his hands and stepped into the storefront just as Rachel was rearranging the mini pies, her back to him. She paused mid-motion, as if she felt him there, sensing his presence. "You okay?" he asked gently, his voice filled with concern. She didn't turn around, her gaze fixed on the pastries. "She left a voicemail, Sloane." Rachel nodded, her fingers brushing over a tin of cinnamon rolls, her movements slow and deliberate. "She said she's flying back tonight, told me I won." As if any of this is a contest, Cole exhaled, his heart aching for her, for the position she had been put in. "It's not. I know that," she said quietly, finally turning to face him, her eyes clear but guarded. "But part of me feels like I still lost something." He stepped closer, bridging the gap between them, drawn to her vulnerability. "What do you mean?" She finally turned to face him, her eyes searching his, seeking reassurance. "You're standing here now, saying all the right things, but 6 years ago you chose her. The life, the spotlight. You didn't come looking for me, Cole. You came here for a signature on a will." His throat tightened, the truth of her words hitting him like a physical blow. "You're right. I'm trying to believe you've changed. But I need to." She trailed off, unable to articulate the depth of her doubts, the extent of her reservations. "Make sure it's not just guilt or nostalgia talking, Rachel," Cole pleaded, his voice laced with sincerity. "It's not," he said softly, meeting her gaze directly. "I've spent years building this life, this business, raising Miles without expecting anyone to swoop in and take over. I don't want you to think you can drop in like some long-lost prince and tie everything up with a neat little bow. That's not what I want." His voice was steady, resolute. "I don't want to take over. I want to earn my place in it, to prove myself worthy of being a part of your lives." Rachel studied him for a long time, searching his eyes for any hint of falsehood. Finding none, her voice softened, a glimmer of hope replacing the guarded skepticism. "Miles asked if you could come to the library event this weekend." He blinked, surprised. "Really?" She nodded. "It's a reading and activity night. Local authors, crafts, kids dress up as their favorite characters. Miles has picked a detective theme, wants everyone involved." Cole smiled, a warmth spreading through him. "Smart choice. Kids got good taste." He asked if you dress up too. "Me?" he asked, a touch of incredulity in his voice. "Cole looks like he could be good at solving clues," Rachel explained, echoing Miles's words. Cole chuckled gently, the sound a mix of amusement and gratitude. "I think I just got my first official invite." Rachel's expression softened, a sliver of warmth peeking through the protective armor she wore. "I told him, it's up to you. I'll be there." Cole grinned, detective hat and all. Then, before she could respond, the bell above the door chimed, announcing a new arrival. A familiar figure stepped inside, broad shoulders filling the doorway, pressed khakis, and a glint of authority emanating from the deputy sheriff's badge catching the light. "Morning, Rachel." The man greeted, his voice a low rumble. "Ed Whitaker, my father," Rachel introduced, her voice calm but layered with a hint of warning. Ed's gaze shifted, landing squarely on Cole. "Didn't expect to find you still here." Cole straightened slightly, a flicker of apprehension crossing his face. "Morning, Sheriff." "Retired," Ed corrected, his tone dry, "but I keep the tone when necessary." Rachel sighed, a silent plea for peace. "No, it's fine," Cole interjected, holding up a hand. "I imagine you've got some thoughts." Ed took a slow, deliberate walk toward the counter, placing a hand on it as if he were assessing its strength. "Thoughts? No, I've got a lifetime of questions, but I figure most of them don't matter anymore." Rachel's eyes darted between them, a knot of unease tightening in her stomach. Ed continued, his gaze unwavering. "My grandson is smart, kind. He's got this way of looking at people like he can see right through them. I won't lie, son, you left a mess, and I've spent the last few years helping clean it up." "I know," Cole said, his voice heavy with regret. "And I'm sorry, more than I can put into words." Ed didn't blink. "You can say sorry all day, but my daughter and grandson deserve more than words. You understand?" "I do." Ed nodded slowly. "Then keep showing up. Not just when it's easy. That boy doesn't need a hero. He needs a man who doesn't leave again." Cole nodded, his voice thick with emotion. "You have my word." Rachel watched her father for a moment, a hint of gratitude softening her expression. Then, she gave him a soft smile. "Want coffee, Dad?" He broke into a rare grin, a glimpse of the man she remembered from her childhood. "Clears throat. I thought you'd never ask." As Rachel turned toward the kitchen, Ed leaned closer to Cole, lowering his voice. "She never said your name in front of him. Not once. Not until last week. That tells me this is delicate. Don't push too hard." Cole nodded, understanding. "I'll follow her lead." "Good. Then maybe, just maybe, we'll all survive this." Later that afternoon, the town of Asheville buzzed with its usual rhythm. Kids spilled out of school, their laughter echoing through the streets, couples strolled hand in hand, their eyes locked in conversation. Shopkeepers chatted outside their storefronts, the air filled with the comforting sounds of community. Cole sat on the front steps of Grand May's house, watching as leaves swirled and danced across the sidewalk, carried by the gentle autumn breeze. A soft rustle from behind made him turn. Ms. Opal emerged from the garden, a woven basket overflowing with herbs clutched in one hand. "Didn't think I'd see you digging roots in this town again, Cole," she said without preamble, her gaze direct and unwavering. Cole gave her a small, hesitant smile. "Didn't think I'd be welcome." "You're not a villain, Cole," she said, settling beside him on the step. "But you left behind a girl who had to become a woman overnight and a child who had questions with no answers." "I didn't know," he said, the words barely a whisper. "Knowing doesn't always matter," she said gently, her voice laced with wisdom. "Being here now does. Staying here will matter more." He looked down, his gaze fixed on the worn wooden step. "Do you think I can earn back what I lost?" Miss Opal smiled faintly, a flicker of something akin to hope in her eyes. "People think redemption comes all at once. Big moment, big gesture. But it's slower than that. Like bread rising, quiet, patient." He let that sink in, the image of dough slowly expanding filling his mind. Then she added, "But the oven's hot now, baby. You can't walk away mid-bake." He laughed softly, the sound lighter than it had been in years, and she patted his knee. "Don't burn it this time." That night, Cole sat at the kitchen table, a worn journal open in front of him. It wasn't a business plan, not a contract, just words, fragments of what he was feeling. Hopes he hadn't dared to say aloud. Promises he desperately wanted to keep. He flipped to a clean page and wrote one sentence across the top. Asterisk be someone Miles never has to question. Asterisk and under it, a second. Asterisk be someone Rachel never has to recover from again. The pen hovered for a moment, suspended above the page, then he set it down, letting the silence of the house answer back. He wasn't here for a second chance at love. He was here to earn it one page, one day, one moment at a time. The Friday afternoon sun slanted low over Asheville, casting long golden shadows through the bakery windows as Rachel boxed up the last of the day's orders. The town was already buzzing about the library's book buddies night, a palpable excitement hanging in the air, and she could practically hear the hum of children's costumes rustling down the sidewalks. Behind her, Cole adjusted his tie in the reflection of the bakery's glass door, an old detective-style fedora perched slightly crooked on his head. He looked out of place in the best possible way, like a puzzle piece that, after years of searching, was finally figuring out where it belonged. "You gonna laugh at me if I show up looking like this?" he asked, glancing back at her, a hint of nervousness in his voice. Rachel didn't smile, not at first. She just studied him, taking in the details of his carefully chosen outfit. The dark slacks, the navy blazer, the vintage toy badge he'd pinned on like Miles had asked. "No," she said softly, her voice filled with genuine emotion. "I think he's going to love it." Cole exhaled, a wave of relief washing over him. "You nervous?" she asked, her eyes searching his. He shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant. "It's just a library, right? Crafts and cookies." Rachel stepped closer, pulling a stray thread off his jacket. Her fingers lingered longer than necessary, a silent acknowledgement of the connection between them. "It's more than that to him, and to me too." Their eyes locked, and for a split second, the tension between them curled warm and inviting, like rising steam from a freshly baked loaf of bread. But then Rachel stepped back, breaking the spell, and grabbed her keys from the counter. "Come on, detective. We're going to be late." The library parking lot was already half full when they pulled in, a kaleidoscope of colors and excitement swirling around them. Parents and kids streamed toward the front entrance, many of the little ones sporting capes, wizard hats, or oversized glasses. Miles stood by the flagpole, a solitary figure in a trench coat and paper mustache, holding a magnifying glass the size of his head. "There's my partner," Cole exclaimed, stepping out of the car, his voice filled with warmth and enthusiasm. Miles turned, his face lighting up like sunrise. "You came." Cole squatted down to his level, meeting his eyes with a genuine smile. "Detective Winslow reporting for duty." Rachel watched as Miles reached into his bag and handed Cole a folded piece of paper. "Your clue sheet. We have to find all the mystery stations to earn a badge." Cole took it solemnly, his face a mask of concentration. "Then we better get moving." The night unfolded in scenes so sweet, they felt unreal, like a dream woven from love and second chances. Cole and Miles crouched beneath tables, hunting for clues, their heads bent together in shared concentration. Rachel watching them from the reading nook, her heart swelling with a joy she hadn't felt in years, laughter spilling around her like sunlight. Miles introduced Cole to his favorite librarian, Mrs. Gable, who raised her brows ever so slightly when she heard the word, "Dad," whispered under the boy's breath. Rachel caught it, too, her heart stuttering in her chest. She didn't say anything, didn't correct him, didn't cry, just watched as Cole gently helped Miles glue googly eyes onto a cardboard detective hat, brushing crumbs off his sleeve with a tenderness that seemed like second nature. It was after the final story time, when the room had emptied out and the cleanup had begun, that Brent Folsom appeared. He stepped through the children's wing doors like he didn't belong there. His usual buttoned-up charm slightly rumpled, his polished veneer momentarily cracked. He held a clipboard in one hand, and that practiced mayoral smile that always had a little edge to it. "Rachel," he called lightly, approaching with confident steps. "Didn't expect to see you here." She straightened, a knot of irritation tightening in her stomach. "It's the biggest community event of the month. Why wouldn't I be here?" Brent smiled wider, but the warmth didn't quite reach his eyes. "Of course, just thought you'd be home prepping for tomorrow's fundraiser." Cole stood up slowly, adjusting his blazer, his gaze steady and unwavering. "Evening, Brent." Brent's eyes flicked to him, a spark of resentment flickering in their depths. "Ah, the prodigal returns." Something like that. Brent's gaze lingered, a silent challenge passing between them. "Heard you've been busy." "I've been reconnecting," Cole replied calmly, his voice even. "With family." Rachel stepped between them, her voice cool and controlled. "What do you want, Brent?" Brent lifted the clipboard, his smile tightening ever so slightly. "Just finalizing the vendor list. I noticed you're not on it this year." "I wasn't invited." "You're always invited," he said, the smile losing its genuine quality. "But I figured with all your distractions lately you'd be stepping back." Rachel's jaw clenched, her eyes flashing with anger. "My bakery's as steady as ever. I'll be there." Cole saw the flicker in Brent's eyes, the complex emotions swirling beneath the surface, possession, jealousy, maybe even regret, but also something deeper, a resentment that Cole had returned and rattled the cage he'd quietly taken over. Brent nodded once, a little too crisp, his voice laced with a veiled threat. Looking forward to it, then, as he turned to go, he paused, a mocking glint in his eyes. "Nice hat, by the way." Cole smiled, unfazed. Miles picked it out. Brent kept walking, his shoulders tight with unspoken frustration. Rachel didn't speak until the door shut behind him, the silence hanging heavy in the air. "That man thinks he owns half this town," she muttered, her voice barely above a whisper. Cole leaned in, his eyes searching hers. "And the other half?" She looked up at him, unsure whether he meant her, or her heart, or the sun now playing with paper hats in the corner. "I don't owe him anything," she said, her voice firm. "I didn't think you did." She sighed, her eyes softening as she gazed at Cole. "He helped a lot after my dad stepped down. Got me city permits, marketing leads. I think he always thought if he just waited long enough you'd come around." She nodded, acknowledging the unspoken truth between them. "But I didn't. I never did." Cole swallowed the question resting on his tongue, the one he wasn't sure he had the right to ask. "Was there ever a chance you would have?" Instead, he whispered, his voice barely audible. Thank you for letting me come tonight. Rachel watched Miles, who was packing up his crafts with care. His brow furrowed in concentration. You earned it, she said softly, her eyes meeting Cole's with a sincerity that resonated deep within his soul. And for the first time in years, Cole believed her. Outside, the air had cooled, a crispness hinting at the approaching winter. Leaves rustled across the sidewalk as they walked to the car, the sounds a symphony of autumn. Miles held Rachel's hand with one and Cole's with the other, swinging their arms like pendulums, his face alight with happiness. Can we do this again? He asked, his voice filled with hopeful anticipation. Cole looked at Rachel, seeking her approval. She looked back, her eyes reflecting a mix of emotions, hope, trepidation, and a burgeoning sense of possibility. We'll see, she said, her voice non-committal, but her fingers brushed Cole's as she buckled Miles into his car seat. A small, almost imperceptible gesture that spoke volumes. And that was answer enough. Saturday morning broke with the kind of slow, golden light that made everything feel softer than it was, like a filter had been placed over the world, blurring the harsh edges and highlighting the beauty. Cole stood in the center of Grand May's kitchen, sleeves rolled up, staring at a pile of handwritten recipes she'd tucked into an old shoebox, her legacy laid bare before him. Her cursive was elegant, slanted, with little heart doodles next to the family favorites, a testament to the love she poured into her cooking. Her peach cobbler was circled 3 times in red ink, with the words never fail underlined at the bottom, a culinary cornerstone of the Whitaker family. He'd been up since before dawn, driven by a restless energy, trying to recreate it for the town fundraiser, wanting to honor her memory and impress Rachel with his efforts. The smell of cinnamon and brown sugar floated through the house, filling the air with a warm, comforting aroma, and despite the peace of the morning, he felt the undercurrent of something shifting beneath the surface, a sense of anticipation mixed with trepidation. Today mattered not just because the town was watching, but because Rachel was watching. Downstairs, he heard a knock on the door, 2 short, 1 long, the familiar rhythm sending a jolt of adrenaline through him. Rachel. He opened the door to find her standing there, framed by the morning light, dressed in jeans and a navy button-up, her hair pulled back, no makeup, her cheeks already flushed pink from the crisp morning air. She was holding a crate overflowing with baked goods, a silent offering of support. Thought you could use some backup, she said, stepping inside, her eyes meeting his with a hesitant smile. He smiled, relief washing over him. Please, I've been drowning in cobbler. She walked to the stove, lifted the lid on the pot, and inhaled deeply, her eyes widening in appreciation. Okay, I'm impressed. You even got the cinnamon right. I followed Grand May's notes to the letter. She'd be proud. He looked at her, his heart pounding in his chest. Would you? She paused, then met his eyes, her gaze unwavering. I am. That small exchange, that simple affirmation, filled something in him, solidifying his resolve. A quiet, steady confidence that he was doing something right, that he was finally on the right path. At the town square, the fundraiser was already in motion, a hive of activity buzzing with energy. Tents were popping up along Main Street, their colorful canopies casting playful shadows on the ground. The irresistible scent of roasted peanuts and kettle corn drifting through the fall air, a siren call to hungry festival goers. Families filtered in with picnic blankets, their laughter mingling with the cheerful chatter of the crowd. Musicians tuned guitars under the ancient sycamore trees, their melodies adding to the festive atmosphere. And a steady hum of conversation wrapped the morning in warmth, creating a tapestry of community. Rachel's booth, Whitaker's hearth, sat nestled between a local honey vendor and a crafts table run by the middle school art club, a prime location in the heart of the action. Cole helped unload trays of muffins, loaves, and pies, each item carefully crafted with love and attention to detail, while Miles bounced beside them in a homemade apron that read official taste tester, his enthusiasm infectious. People stared, their curiosity piqued. Whispers passed through the crowd, not mean-spirited, but laced with intrigue. The man who left had returned, not only a changed man but with a son no one knew existed, a twist worthy of a small-town soap opera. Tammy Lou appeared with a fresh pot of coffee and a wink, her eyes twinkling with amusement. Y'all have become the town's favorite soap opera, but better dressed. Rachel laughed, handing her a warm pastry. Then we better give them a good finale. By mid-morning, the booth was buzzing, a testament to Rachel's hard work and the irresistible allure of her baked goods. Customers lined up, their mouths watering as they placed their orders, complimenting the spread, their voices filled with genuine appreciation. Cole worked beside Rachel, a seamless partnership born of shared history and a growing sense of trust, handing out change, explaining the flavors of each treat, smiling at old classmates and new faces alike. He wasn't just passing through anymore. He was in it, fully present, invested in the community and the people who called it home. Then Brent showed up, his presence disrupting the peaceful rhythm of the morning. This time it wasn't just a passing hello, a casual acknowledgement. He walked straight to the booth, his posture determined, a clipboard tucked under one arm, dressed like he was running for office. Even though the election wasn't for months, his calculated charm radiating outward. Morning, Rachel, he said, his voice syrupy sweet, but lacking the genuine warmth it once possessed. Rachel's jaw tightened slightly, her guard going up instinctively. Brent. He looked over the display, his eyes scanning the arrangement of baked goods with a critical eye. Looks like business is booming. It is, Cole answered, his voice calm but carrying a subtle undercurrent of warning. Brent didn't acknowledge him, his focus solely on Rachel. Funny how success seems to follow some people no matter where they land. Rachel forced a polite smile, her eyes hardening. Is there something you need, Brent? Brent held up a flyer, a self-satisfied smirk playing on his lips. Just a reminder we have town hall this week. Small business updates, development zoning, infrastructure. His eyes finally flicked to Cole, a flicker of disdain in their depths. You might be interested considering the rumors. Cole tilted his head, his curiosity piqued. What rumors? Brent smiled thinly, his voice dripping with insinuation. That you're planning to buy up old property downtown. Renovate. Flip it again. Profit over people, the classic outsider move. Rachel turned sharply, her eyes blazing with anger. What? I haven't bought anything, Cole said carefully, choosing his words with precision. Not yet. I'm still listening, learning. But you've looked, Rachel said, her voice quieter now, laced with disappointment. He met her eyes, his gaze sincere. Only because I thought it could help. I saw some vacant lots that could become something better, safer, a place for the community to thrive. Brent stepped in, seizing the opportunity to sow seeds of doubt. That's how it starts, Rachel. Outsiders come in with good intentions, promises of progress. Next thing you know, rent doubles and families move out, the heart of the town ripped out for the sake of profit. I'm not trying to bulldoze anything, Cole said, his voice calm but firmer, his gaze unwavering. I've been meeting with local partners, listening to their concerns, seeking their input. Quietly, respectfully, Rachel stepped back slightly, folding her arms, her expression unreadable. You didn't mention that. I wanted to have a plan first, something concrete to show you. And once again, she said, her voice tight with a familiar pain. You made a plan without me. The moment stretched, the noise of the festival seeming to fade into the background, replaced by the sharp, aching quiet that hung heavy in the air. Brent seized the opportunity, his voice laced with false concern. Just something to think about, Rachel. Asheville needs to protect its own. He turned and walked away, leaving a silence behind him that was heavier than before, a sense of unease settling over the booth like a shroud. Cole looked at Rachel, his eyes filled with remorse. I was going to tell you I just needed more time. You always say that, she said, her voice softer now, but tired, the weight of past betrayals etched into her features. You always need more time. He reached out gently, his hand hovering in the air, but she stepped back, creating a distance between them that felt vast and unbridgeable. I need to check on Miles, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, and walked off toward the crafts tent where Tammy Lou was painting pumpkins with the kids, seeking solace in the familiar comfort of her friend's presence. Cole stood there, alone amidst the bustling crowd, the scent of cinnamon and peaches, once so comforting, now suddenly sickly sweet, a reminder of what he had lost and what he risked losing again. He'd come here to build something, to create a new foundation for his life, but now he wasn't sure what was standing and what had already started to crumble. Behind him, an older woman handed him a $5 bill, her eyes filled with sympathy, and pointed to a mini cobbler, her silent offering of support a small comfort in the midst of his despair. He boxed it up in silence, his movements mechanical, his heart heavy with regret, trying not to crumble under the weight of his mistakes. He looked toward the crafts tent where Rachel knelt beside Miles, her hands gentle, her smile quiet, but her body was turned away from him, a silent barrier erected between them. He wasn't outside the circle anymore, completely shut out, not fully, but he wasn't fully inside it either, a part of the family, not yet. And the crack between the two, the space where trust should have been, it was starting to show, a fragile fissure that threatened to widen with each passing day. It rained the next morning, a soft, persistent drizzle that painted the streets of Asheville silver and made everything feel slower, heavier, as if the weight of the world had settled upon the town. Rachel stood at the window of her bakery, a steaming mug of coffee cooling in her hands, watching the raindrops trail down the glass like the thoughts running through her mind, a chaotic stream of emotions she couldn't seem to control. Cole hadn't texted since the fundraiser. Not a good morning, not a can we talk. She wasn't sure if she was relieved or disappointed, caught in a confusing mix of conflicting desires. Behind her, Tammy Lou flipped through invoices, her brow furrowed in concentration, occasionally peeking over her glasses at Rachel with a knowing look. You know he's not a mind reader, right? Rachel didn't respond, her gaze fixed on the rain-soaked streets. Tammy set the papers down, her voice softening. You didn't exactly leave the door open yesterday. Rachel turned, her eyes flashing with a hint of defensiveness. He was making secret plans about my town, my neighborhood, my future. Again. He was making plans to stay, Rachel. And that's what scares you the most. Tammy countered, her voice gentle but firm. You said you didn't want promises. You said you wanted proof. He's trying to give it to you. Rachel opened her mouth to argue, then shut it again, realizing the truth in Tammy's words. Tammy walked over, placed a hand on her shoulder, her eyes filled with empathy. I saw him with Miles yesterday, Rachel. I saw the way he looked at you both, the genuine affection, the desire to be a part of your lives. That man didn't just show up. He's trying, Rachel. He's really trying. Rachel nodded slowly, her resolve wavering. I know. Outside, a car pulled up to the curb, its headlights cutting through the rain. A silver rental, anonymous and temporary. Cole stepped out, his head bent against the rain, holding something under a clear plastic covering. Something that looked like papers, blueprints perhaps. He hesitated at the door, his posture uncertain. Rachel didn't move, her heart pounding in her chest. Are you going to let him in, Rachel, or let the rain do the talking? Tammy asked, a hint of exasperation in her voice. Rachel opened the door before she could change her mind, her hand trembling slightly as she reached for the handle. Cole looked like he hadn't slept, his face drawn and pale, his clothes damp at the shoulders, his hair curling at the edges from the mist, a stark contrast to the neatly put-together image he usually presented. I know this isn't the best time, he said, his voice hesitant. But I need to show you something. She stepped aside wordlessly, allowing him to enter the warm haven of the bakery, her heart pounding in her chest. He laid the papers out on the counter, a collection of documents that represented his hopes and dreams for the future. 4 blueprints, 2 sketches, and a letter clipped to the top, each one a testament to his commitment. I've been working with a local architect, he said, his voice gaining confidence as he spoke. Someone Grand May hired once for a church remodel. I asked her to help me draw something up, something that would benefit the community, something that would make a difference. Rachel scanned the drawings, her eyes widening in surprise. They weren't shopping plazas or luxury condos, the kind of developments that threatened to gentrify the town. They were small, practical, cozy, a community space, he said, his voice filled with passion. Open market stalls for local farmers and artisans, a daycare center for working parents, rent-controlled housing for single parents and seniors, a culinary incubator for startup kitchens, a place where dreams could take root and flourish. Rachel looked at him, stunned, her mind reeling from the revelation. Why didn't you say anything sooner? I wasn't sure you'd believe me, he confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. I was afraid you'd think I was trying to take over again, to impose my will on your life. She touched one of the blueprints, her fingertips tracing a hand-drawn sketch of what looked like her bakery, duplicated into a teaching kitchen, a place where she could share her passion with others. I'm not trying to build over your life, Rachel, he said, his voice filled with sincerity. I'm trying to build into it, to create something together that will benefit everyone. The silence between them filled with something unspoken, a possibility, a glimmer of hope, a long-awaited truth. Then the door burst open, shattering the fragile peace that had settled between them. Mom, Miles shouted, breathless, his eyes wide with concern. He'd just come from the school bus drop-off around the corner, his raincoat hanging crooked over his backpack, his face flushed with exertion. Miss Opal's not at church, and she always brings lemon bars on Monday. I knocked, but no one answered. Rachel blinked, her heart sinking. Miss Opal, a pillar of the community, never missed a Monday service. Something was wrong. Cole looked at her, his eyes filled with understanding. She never misses a Monday. Rachel grabbed her keys, her movements swift and decisive. Let's go. They reached Miss Opal's house within minutes, the urgency of the situation driving them forward. Cole knocked gently on the door, his voice filled with concern. Miss Opal? It's Rachel and Cole. Are you alright? No answer. Rachel called her name, her voice laced with anxiety. Miss Opal? It's Rachel. Are you home? Still nothing. But just as they were about to call for help, the front door creaked open slowly, revealing a disheveled Miss Opal, standing there in her robe, her hair uncombed, her eyes bleary. Oh heavens, is it Monday? She said, her voice weak and confused. I must have overslept. Rachel stepped forward, her face etched with concern. Are you okay, Miss Opal? You scared us. Miss Opal chuckled, the sound brittle and frail. I just overslept, dearie. First time in years. I guess I'm finally slowing down. They walked her to the couch, their arms supporting her frail frame, checked her blood pressure, and made her a cup of tea, their concern evident in their every action. She was fine, just tired. She insisted, her voice growing stronger with each passing moment. But something about the moment, the shared sense of vulnerability, made everything else feel smaller, less important. Cole sat beside her gently, his touch tender and respectful, lifting her feet onto a stool, his eyes filled with genuine concern. You scared us, Miss Opal. Miss Opal patted his hand, her eyes filled with wisdom. Life has a way of reminding us what matters, dearie. Sometimes we just need a little nudge. Rachel stood in the doorway, watching the two of them, the former pariah and the heart of the town, connected by a shared sense of humanity, and something cracked gently inside her, a wall she had built around her heart finally beginning to crumble. Later, back at the bakery, as the rain let up and the clouds began to part, a sliver of sunlight peeking through the gray, she finally said what had been building inside her, a confession long overdue. I was scared too, Cole. Cole looked at her, his eyes filled with understanding. Of what, Rachel? That if I let you all the way back in, I'd lose myself again, she said honestly, her voice trembling slightly. That I'd build a life around someone who might leave when things got hard, someone I couldn't count on. I get it, he said softly, reaching for her hand. I understand why you're scared. But today, she continued, her voice gaining strength. Seeing you with her, seeing you care for Miss Opal, hearing your plans, it reminded me why I loved you in the first place. The good man I knew you were, the man you're trying to be again. Cole stepped closer, his gaze intense. And now, I don't know yet, she said honestly, her voice barely a whisper. But I want to find out with you, not around you like satellites circling each other, but with you, side by side, hand in hand. His voice dropped, filled with a hopeful anticipation he hadn't dared to feel in years. Does that mean I can stay? She took his hand, her fingers interlacing with his, a tangible connection that spoke volumes. It means you already have. The sun returned on Tuesday, bright and warm, as if the rain had never touched the town, its golden rays bathing Asheville in a soft, comforting light. The sidewalks glowed, drying quickly under the warmth of the sun, and the scent of fresh pastries once again floated out from Whitaker's hearth, a beacon of hope and new beginnings. Rachel stood behind the counter, her hands dusted with flour, her cheeks pink from baking, her eyes sparkling with a joy she hadn't felt in years. The bell above the door chimed softly, announcing a new arrival, and when she looked up, Cole was standing there with a wooden crate in his arms, a sheepish grin on his face. What is that? She asked, her curiosity piqued, wiping her hands on her apron. A peace offering, he said, his eyes twinkling with amusement. You already brought blueprints, emotional honesty, and cobbler. I'd say you've over-delivered. He grinned, setting the crate down on the counter. Inside were jars of peach preserves, small sacks of cornmeal, and several vintage cookbooks from Grand May's attic, a treasure trove of culinary history. Rachel raised an eyebrow, a hint of amusement in her voice. You raided your grandmother's pantry? I organized it, he said defensively, then realized the implication of his words. Okay, maybe I raided it a little, but I realized half of it belonged in a community kitchen, a place where everyone could share in the bounty. Thought maybe you could feature a Grand May special, once a week, a tribute to her legacy and her love of food. Rachel touched the edge of one of the jars, her fingers tracing the faded label. She'd have liked that, she said softly, her voice filled with emotion. I hope you do too. I do, she said, her eyes meeting his with a sincerity that warmed his soul. They shared a quiet moment, a silent understanding passing between them, the kind of connection that didn't need words to express the depth of their feelings. Outside, Miles ran up the walkway, his backpack bouncing against his back, a leaf crown tilted on his head like a little king of autumn, his face beaming with excitement. Guess what? He shouted as he burst inside, his energy filling the room. Miss Opal says I can help plant flowers at her place on Saturday. She said I got good soil sense. Rachel smiled, her heart swelling with pride. She's not wrong. You're a natural, Miles. Miles noticed the crate on the counter and climbed onto a stool to peek inside, his eyes widening in wonder. Is that for the cafe? Are we getting a cafe? It's for all of us, Miles, Cole said, his voice filled with warmth. Community recipes. A way to share our love of food with everyone. Maybe you can help me name one, Rachel suggested, her eyes twinkling with mischief. Miles lit up, his imagination soaring. Can we call it Miles's Magical Muffins? Rachel laughed, the sound light and carefree, a welcome change from the tension of the past few days. Only if they come with extra sprinkles. They were still laughing, their voices mingling together in a harmonious blend, when the front door opened again, and Brent stepped inside, his presence casting a shadow over the joyful scene. He moved slower this time, his shoulders slumped, his usual confident stride replaced by a hesitant gait. No clipboard, no mask of charm, just him, Brent Folsom, a man stripped bare of his ambitions and pretenses, standing there in a gray jacket, carrying a manila envelope. Rachel's smile faded, a knot of apprehension tightening in her stomach. Cole instinctively shifted closer to Miles, his protective instincts kicking in, shielding the boy without needing to be told. Brent offered a nod, his eyes filled with a quiet resignation. Sorry to interrupt. I won't stay long. Rachel wiped her hands again, her gaze unwavering. What is it, Brent? He stepped forward and laid the envelope on the counter, the papers inside rustling softly. Some final paperwork from the city council. Zoning discussion next week. You'll want to. He waved. Thanks. When the door swished shut behind Brent, Rachel turned to Cole, a surprised smile playing on her lips. Well, that was unexpected. Cole chuckled, a warm sound that filled the small space. Growth, he said, his eyes twinkling. It happens. Rachel laughed, leaning her head briefly against his shoulder. The scent of cinnamon and rising dough swirled around them, a comforting aroma of home. I didn't think this would feel real. All of it. I didn't think I deserved it. She felt the gentle squeeze of his arm around her. You didn't? He teased, a playful glint in his eyes. He gave her a light nudge. But you earned it, Ratch. As the golden afternoon sun streamed through the bakery windows, painting the dust motes dancing in the air, and the comforting scent of cinnamon rolls intensified, Rachel pulled a clean order slip from the register. With a flourish, she wrote across it in bold, looping cursive, then carefully pinned it on the corkboard. A place of honor amongst family photos and community notices. Coming soon. Grand Maze Peach Muffins, a Whitaker Winslow original. Cole looked at it, his gaze lingering on her name intertwined with his heart swelling with a feeling he hadn't known he craved. For the first time in a long time, maybe ever, he didn't feel like he was desperately trying to find his way back. He was home. He had come home. The first frost of the season painted the rooftops a delicate white, like powdered sugar sprinkled on a gingerbread village. It was on just such a morning, crisp and bright, that Cole walked towards the town hall, Rachel at his side, her hand warm in his. The week had been blessedly quiet, a good quiet, the kind that allowed them to settle into a comfortable rhythm. Shared breakfasts at the bakery before the sun peeked over the mountains. Miles dragging his backpack in a sleepy shuffle. Small town greetings gradually growing warmer with each passing day. And every night, after the last pie was boxed and the last chair was stacked, Rachel would walk him to the porch swing, and they would talk in hushed tones until the stars emerged, scattered across the inky sky like diamonds. But tonight, things felt different, charged with an energy that hummed just beneath the surface. The future felt like it was hanging in the balance, waiting on the other side of a single vote. As they stepped into the hall, the room buzzed with anticipation. Rows of metal folding chairs stretched out before them, facing a long table where the town council sat, their faces serious, armed with notepads and water bottles. Locals clustered in the back, their expressions a mix of curiosity and skepticism. Rachel squeezed Cole's hand, her knuckles white. You ready? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Nope, he whispered back, his throat tight. But I'm here. She smiled, a small, brave, beautiful smile. Brent stood across the room, speaking quietly with a council member. He spotted them, gave a curt nod, and held Cole's gaze. It wasn't a challenge this time. It was something else, something far more profound. Respect, understanding, perhaps even a hint of regret. Mayor Lillian Green, a woman with a voice as firm as her handshake, called the meeting to order. The minutes ticked by slowly. Budget approval, sidewalk repairs, a new mural for the elementary school. Then came the development proposals. Next on the agenda, Lillian said, adjusting her glasses, the Winslow Whitaker proposal for a multi-use community space on the old Caldwell lot. Cole rose, his heart pounding against his ribs. His palms were damp, but his voice, surprisingly, didn't shake. He laid out the plan carefully and deliberately. Accessible market stalls for local farmers and artisans, a learning kitchen co-run with the high school home economics program, affordable childcare support for working parents, a way to bring opportunity to Asheville without uprooting the people who already called it home. He didn't use big city buzzwords or empty promises, just stories. He told them about Miss Opal, about how she'd nearly been forgotten that rainy Monday, lost in the shuffle of a world that moved too fast. He told them about Rachel's late nights, her tireless efforts to keep the bakery afloat, her unwavering dedication to the community. He told them about a little boy named Miles, who drew his dream town filled with towering trees, a well-stocked library, and a donut shop where nobody was ever in a hurry. When he finished, the room was utterly still, every eye fixed on him. Rachel stood and added her voice to his, not as a business owner seeking approval, but as someone born on this land, someone who understood its soul. She spoke about legacy, about creating change that didn't erase the past, about second chances, and the courage it took to give someone one. When they sat down, their hands still intertwined, Lillian took a deep breath and said, let's vote. Passed unanimously. Rachel turned to Cole, her eyes brimming with tears. You did it. He shook his head, a small smile gracing his lips. We did. Tammy Lou clapped from the back row, her ever-present chewing gum momentarily forgotten, her face alight with joy. Brent gave a quiet nod of approval. Even Miss Opal, perched in her shawl near the heater, dabbed at a tear with a lace-edged handkerchief. Later that night, on Grand May's porch, Rachel wrapped herself in one of the old quilts, its faded colors telling stories of generations past, and watched Cole stack kindling in the outdoor fire pit. He'd gotten the idea from one of Miles's storybooks. A family fire, he'd called it. A place where people could sit together, disconnected from the noise of the world. No screens, no distractions, just warmth and time. The first flames caught, dancing and flickering, sending sparks spiraling upward like stars learning to rise. Rachel sipped her hot cider, the warmth spreading through her. Without looking at him, she said, you didn't ask me what I wanted after the vote. He paused, watching the flames. I figured you'd tell me when you were ready. She turned to him, her gaze searching. I want to stay right here. With me, with you, with this town, with the life we didn't get to finish before. Cole sat beside her, his shoulder brushing against hers. You think if we can only stop being afraid, it'll fall apart. He looked into the heart of the fire, lost in thought. I'm not afraid anymore. She leaned in, her voice a near whisper. Then neither am I. The screen door creaked open behind them. Miles tiptoed out, dragging a blanket and a notebook, his eyes bright with excitement. I'm writing a new story, he announced. Rachel smiled, her heart swelling. What's it about? Miles climbed into Cole's lap, snuggling close. A boy who thought he didn't have a dad, but it turned out his dad was just lost. And when he found his way back, they built a whole town together. Rachel's breath caught in her throat. Cole held Miles a little tighter, and the fire crackled, as if it knew this night was meant to last, to be etched forever in their memories. The first snow came early that year, blanketing Asheville in a soft hush that made the whole town feel like it was holding its breath, waiting for something magical. The bakery windows fogged with warmth, creating a cozy haven against the winter chill. While outside, children built crooked snowmen with carrot noses and twig arms, and couples strolled beneath wool scarves and strings of twinkling holiday lights. Inside Whitaker's hearth, the scent of ginger and clove mingled with the aroma of freshly baked bread, wrapping around every customer who stepped through the door like a warm embrace. Rachel moved through the shop with practiced grace, her laughter echoing above the clatter of mugs and the thump of boots against the welcome mat, but her eyes kept drifting to the clock on the wall. Cole was late. They were supposed to meet for a planning meeting, final sketches, timelines, milestones, all the official markers of a dream finally becoming real. But the hour had passed quietly, and her phone remained silent on the counter. A knot of worry tightened in her stomach. Tammy Lou popped her head out from the kitchen, her brow furrowed. "You burning holes in that clock, girl?" Rachel forced a smile, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "He's never late." Before Tammy could respond, the bell above the door jingled merrily, and there he was. Cole stepped in, his hair dusted with snow, a scarf wrapped loosely around his neck. But something in his expression, a gravity she hadn't seen before, made Rachel still. He walked straight to the counter and placed a folder in front of her. "What's this?" she asked, her voice barely audible. He looked at her, his eyes tender yet serious. "An offer for the Caldwell lot." She blinked, confused. "From another developer?" He nodded, his jaw tight. Rachel opened the folder slowly, her fingers trembling. The proposal was clean, polished, slick. Promises of upscale retail, boutique apartments, a state-of-the-art fitness center. "Did they go around us?" she asked, her voice laced with disbelief. "No," Cole said quietly. "They came to me yesterday." He paused, his gaze unwavering. "Said if I backed out now, they'd triple my original investment." The silence dropped heavy between them, thick with unspoken questions and doubts. Rachel closed the folder, her heart pounding. And I turned them down." Her breath caught in her throat. "I told them this town doesn't need more luxury," he said, his voice filled with conviction. "It needs roots, families, places like this," he said, sweeping a glance across the bustling cafe. "It needs you." Rachel blinked, emotions rising fast, threatening to overwhelm her. "Why didn't you just say that?" "Because I needed to know for myself," he admitted, his voice raw with honesty. "That I wasn't chasing status again, that I wasn't still the guy who walked away." He took a deep breath, his gaze locked on hers. "I'm not." Her heart swelled with a love so profound it took her breath away. Tammy Lou, watching from behind a tray of cookies, mouthed, "Kiss him already," before disappearing back into the kitchen. Rachel walked around the counter and stood in front of him, her gaze meeting his. "You didn't have to prove anything." "Yes," he said, his voice firm. "I did." She reached up, her fingers gently touching his scarf, brushing away the snow that clung to his collar. "Then you've proved it every day, every step. You're not just here anymore, Cole. You're with us." They didn't kiss. Not yet, but they didn't need to. The connection between them was palpable, a silent understanding that transcended words. That night, under the soft glow of the porch lights, Miles brought out a drawing he'd been working on, his brow furrowed in concentration. "A new one. This is the festival plan," he announced, laying it across the table with a flourish. "We could call it the Winter Light Fair. There's going to be a big tree and a cookie contest and music, like real music, fiddles and bells, and a guy with a beard who plays harmonica." Rachel leaned over the drawing, her eyes twinkling. "You've even marked food stalls. Grand Maze Cobbler gets a whole tent." Cole grinned, his heart overflowing. "Ambitious." "I'm not done," Miles added, his voice filled with excitement. "I want to ask Miss Opal to open it with a speech, and maybe we can plant a tree. Like a family tree, not the kind in books, a real one that grows." Rachel and Cole exchanged a glance, one of those deep, wordless looks that said everything. Later that night, after Miles had gone to bed and the snow fell quietly against the windows, Rachel sat curled beside Cole on the couch, Grand Maze quilt wrapped around their legs, a comforting weight. She reached into a drawer and pulled out a box, worn at the edges, tied with a ribbon that had faded to the softest rose. "What's this?" Cole asked, his brow furrowed with curiosity. Rachel untied the ribbon slowly, her fingers trembling slightly. Inside were the letters she'd written him but never sent, one for every year he'd been gone, some short, some angry, some filled with dreams she knew would never come true. "I was going to burn them," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "But something told me to hold on." He touched the top letter, his name written in careful loops. "Can I read them?" She shook her head, a tear tracing a path down her cheek. "Not yet." He nodded, accepting her decision. "Then will you write me a new one?" She smiled softly, her eyes shining. "It won't fit in the box." "Why not?" "Because this one doesn't have an ending." The morning of the Winter Light Fair dawned bright and gold, as if the town itself had been waiting for this moment, holding its breath in anticipation. Snow dusted the edges of rooftops, glittering under the low sun, and downtown Asheville buzzed with the quiet excitement of something real, something earned. Rachel stood in front of the mirror, fastening a necklace around her neck. Nothing flashy, just a simple silver pendant that had belonged to Grand May. Felt right, a connection to the past, a symbol of hope for the future. Today wasn't just a celebration. It was a culmination. Outside, the scent of cinnamon rolls and pine needles drifted through the crisp air, a heady combination that drew people into the heart of the town. Wooden booths lined the square, decorated with garlands and handmade signs painted by local school kids. Every detail, every wreath, every light had come from someone's hands, infused with the spirit of the community. Miles raced through the kitchen with a candy cane in one hand and a wrinkled flyer in the other, his cheeks flushed with excitement. Mom! Miss Opal said I get to help light the tree tonight with a real switch like the mayor does." Rachel laughed, scooping him up in a hug. "You're the man of the hour, huh?" He nodded proudly, his eyes sparkling. "She says I earned it." Cole entered, buttoning his coat, his eyes softening as he watched them. He did. We all did. Later that afternoon, the square was alive with music and color, a kaleidoscope of joy and connection. Fiddle tunes floated through the air as neighbors mingled, old friends reunited, and strangers shared hot cider like family. Miss Opal sat bundled in her shawl on a wooden bench near the stage, a proud smile never leaving her face. Cole stood near the edge of the crowd, looking out over the people, the booths, the glowing lights, and the magnificent tree that stood tall and proud in the center of it all. Rachel came to his side, her hand slipping into his. "You okay?" "I've built a lot of things," he said, his voice filled with awe. "But nothing ever felt this personal." She squeezed his hand, her eyes shining. That's because it is personal. It's not just blueprints and spreadsheets. It's a life. It's ours. He looked down at her, his heart overflowing with love and gratitude. I think Grand May would have liked this. Rachel smiled, her eyes twinkling with mischief. She would have been the first in line for a peach muffin. As night fell, casting long shadows across the snow-covered square, the tree stood tall and proud in the center of it all, a beacon of hope and community. Handmade ornaments glimmered beneath twinkling lights, each one a testament to the creativity and spirit of Asheville. A hush fell over the crowd as Mayor Lillian stepped up to the microphone, her face illuminated by the soft glow of the lights. We come together tonight not just to light a tree, she said, her voice warm and clear, but to celebrate something more. A town that chooses roots over noise, people over profit, love over fear. She paused, her gaze sweeping over the crowd. And no one represents that spirit more than the boy who reminded us what community truly looks like. She turned toward the tree. Miles Whitaker. Miles stepped forward, his red scarf slightly askew, his cheeks pink with excitement. He reached for the switch, his small hand trembling with anticipation. You ready, bud? Cole whispered, kneeling beside him, his voice thick with emotion. Miles nodded, his eyes shining with pride. Can I say something first? The mayor handed him the microphone, her expression warm and encouraging. Rachel's hand flew to her heart, her eyes filled with tears. Miles took a deep breath, his small frame radiating confidence. My name is Miles and I live here with my mom, and now with my dad, too. And we built this place because we wanted people to stay and love stuff and not run away when stuff gets hard. And Miss Opal says when you plant something you got to stick around to water it. So we're going to stick around. Laughter, soft applause, and a few sniffles moved through the crowd, a wave of emotion washing over the square. Now I'm going to light the tree, he declared, his voice ringing with excitement. He flipped the switch. 1,000 lights burst into life, illuminating the square in a dazzling display of color and warmth. The crowd cheered, a collective roar of joy and celebration, and music swelled again as people clapped, embraced, and shared in the magic of the moment. Rachel pulled Miles into her arms, holding him tight, and Cole wrapped them both up in a hug, holding them like they were the only 3 people in the world, their hearts overflowing with love and gratitude. An hour later, the crowd thinned, and snow began to fall again, light and slow, like confetti drifting from heaven. Cole took Rachel's hand and led her to the magnolia tree at the edge of the square. Beneath it, a small wooden bench had been placed, its surface covered with a soft layer of snow. On it was a plaque. For those who return, and those who forgive. Rachel touched the plaque with trembling fingers, her eyes filled with tears. You did this. We did, he corrected, his voice filled with love. Together. From behind them, Miles appeared, carrying a small carving tool and wearing a look of intense focus. What's that, sweetheart? Rachel asked, her voice soft. Grand May's bench needs a name, he said, kneeling at the base of the tree. He began to carve, his small hands working with surprising precision. The letters were wobbly, uneven, but true, etched with love and intention. Miles' mom, dad. Rachel looked at Cole, her eyes glistening with tears. He leaned in, his forehead touching hers, his gaze filled with tenderness. You still think the story doesn't have an ending? He whispered. She shook her head, a soft smile gracing her lips. No, I think it's just the beginning. And as the snow fell softly, blanketing the town in a peaceful hush, and the lights of the winter light fair glowed brightly, their story, the one they thought they'd lost, wrapped around them like a warm embrace, a promise of love, hope, and endless possibilities. Their story was just beginning.